Hi, I'm Debbie Georgatos. Welcome to my show, America, Can We Talk? Today, we're going to talk about the Women's March, Exposed and Deflated, Frederick Douglass and MLK Day, the Virginia gun rally trap, and the impeachment. And, of course, I'll tell you why these stories matter to you. Stay tuned.
Debbie Georgatos, host of America Can We Talk, is an author, attorney, and political analyst whose mission is to inspire the American political conversation about preserving liberty in the best country on earth.
And welcome again to America Can We Talk and to today's First Five. I'm Debbie Georgatos. I had a really fun adventure over the weekend, yesterday, Sunday. You know, if you watch the show regularly, you know we were out of town for 2 weeks in California. We came back late Saturday night, and Sunday, yesterday, I had organized a little counter rally to the Women's March here in Dallas, Texas. I want to tell you about going to that counter rally, which was very fun. It was in downtown Dallas. But first, I want to tell you why I would actually organize something as a counter rally to the Women's March. Let me be clear. I support women having equal access to education, to careers, to be treated fairly in the workplace, to be free from abuse. I stand up for women. I want women in the highest elected offices that they can earn and that they can win. I love that. I want women in positions of power in education, in all sorts of fields. But I am drastically and deeply opposed to the Women's March. Let me tell you what the Women's March announced as their big topics for the year. They had themes for the year. And if you didn't realize this all began when President Trump won the election in 2016 and then was to be inaugurated in January 2017. So the day after the inauguration, there was a Women's March in Washington, D.C. And I want to not call it Women's March, a so-called Women's March. It's a group that uses the name Women's March, but they have the issues that they are marching about have nothing to do with women. The Women's March is not for women. The Women's March is for leftists. They're left-wing advocacy for a variety of issues, and they call themselves the Women's March. But this year the numbers are greatly diminished. I'll get that in a moment. But I want to tell you what the Women's March said, their words, what they stand for this year. They call it reproductive justice, but it's pro-abortion. They are calling for immigration reform, which includes things like weakening or abandoning the border, letting more and more people in. Immigration reform means radical, aggressive denial of the notion of citizenship, a radical improvement or increase in the number of people coming to America. They stand for the idea that no person can be an illegal. Like you can't call someone an illegal alien even though they're not a citizen and they don't have a legal right to be here. So they have abortion, immigration reform, LGBTQ acceptance. So every issue that the LGBT community advocates for, they advocate for acceptance. And the final one they focus, their final issue this year was gun control. And the reason I say the Women's March is not a women's march, the Women's March is a leftist march, is because many women in this country disagree with the left-wing view that the Women's March is standing for. The Women's March is standing for radical leftism, not for women. This is why I organized this opposition rally downtown in Dallas. It was really fun. I'll tell you a few quick things about it. First, we had to get a permit ahead of time, go to the police department, get a First Amendment activity permit, and we're told where we could be. So in Dallas, they had a Women's March, you know, the official Women's March. I would say we were more the real women, but anyway, the Women's March went by. We were across the street. We just held signs, and, you know, we said things like safe, secure borders, protect everyone. We support life. We support President Trump. So it was a fun thing to do, but a couple bits of commentary on it, and I think these are probably true in every Women's March around the country. Number one, the police were wonderful. The police showed up early, met with us. We all agreed where we could be, where the march was going to go. They were friendly, helpful, hung around the whole time, some in plain clothes, some in uniforms. And these police officers included men and women. a black police officer, several black police officers, a Hispanic police officer, white police officers. The point is, it had nothing to do with race. Those police officers were there to do their job, and they did. They were cheerful, they were conscientious. As the Women's March protesters went by, and we were chanting our USA and, Donald Trump loves America, and the other chants that we did. And, the other marchers, the Women's March, are doing their march and their slogans. It was very peaceful. This is what America is supposed to permit and allow. The First Amendment in the United States, which is just a gift to the American citizens, allows things like this. In fact, one police officer, when he first arrived, before the Women's March had arrived, I was talking to him and just said, I just want to thank you so much for being here. And he said, hey, this is America. This is a black police officer talking. This is America. This is one of the basic things about America. You can be out and say what you stand for. Other people come and say what they stand for. You can stand up, you can protest, you can wave signs. He was just saying, isn't this great? This is America. And it is. Now, folks, we're not going to solve all the legal issues in America and all the policy disputes with marches. Marches are good, and they're in fact great, but they don't really accomplish the changing of very many minds. People join marches because they think they're standing for a cause. To get people to support a rally, to support a march, they have to understand the issues, or we would hope they would understand the issues. And so you can do marches, they're great things. They are a counter for the media that tries to always prop up the left-wing marches and ignore the right-wing marches. But the fact is, showing up a little bit to say, you know what, these people over, that was one of our chants, is you don't speak for us. The Women's March doesn't speak for us. The Women's March speaks for radical leftism. A few other quick tidbits about the Women's March. So actually, the way this all worked this year, Saturday of this week was the Women's March in Washington, and I think New York. And then the next day, Sunday, they had the Women's March in cities around the country. That's why we had it here in Dallas yesterday. The numbers turning out in the Women's March all across the country, and they've been doing this ever since Donald Trump was inaugurated. So January 2017 was their first march. So they've had 17, 18, 19, 20. This is their fourth Women's March. And every year the numbers go down drastically. Drastically. The numbers drop off. Most of the march in 2017, the Women's March, was just anger that their gal Hillary didn't win. They were upset because Donald Trump won the election. But they find reasons to continue to hold marches. A lot have to do with abortion. And I was going to tell you a little description of the signs we saw yesterday of the Women's March. They had a lot of people calling for Trump to be impeached. They had a lot of people standing up for reproductive justice, in fact, one sign was a free abortion for all. But, we had a little bit of interaction, but not much. And there were signs, a lot about impeaching Trump, a lot about abortion. They had some strange, like they had a woman dressed up in a Native American costume and with like war paint on her face. And she had a sign, Justice for Native Americans. I don't know what she wanted exactly. That's all her sign said. But you had people like that. You had a lot of people. They were advocating for transgender rights, transgender equality, those kind of issues. So it was a panoply of issues, and a group of people there who looked, if I could characterize them, pretty much like unhappy people. A lot of them looked angry. Quite a few of them were yelling angry stuff at our side, and we were just smiling, holding our signs. We support Donald Trump. We support secure borders. Just strong, positive, what we stand for signs. It was a real enjoyable engagement in the First Amendment, the spirit of the First Amendment in this country. I also think it's important to understand leftists tend to march more. They tend to bring people out in the streets more. They use their marches as street theater. I've used that expression in the show many times before. It is intended to convey the impression to Americans who aren't paying close enough attention that there are more people who support their left-wing views than really do. It is intended not just to express their views, but to manipulate public opinion, to convince people that more and more people, they think they're going to convince more and more people that they really stand for a majority and they really stand for the issues that are right. I will tell you in closing on the Women's March, on our website, americacanwetalk.org, I'm pretty sure I have a link. If I don't, I'll put it up later. A link to the platform page of the Women's March. Because when I tell you, I really support I am full-on support of women having equal access to education, employment, success, achievement, being paid for the value of their contribution in this free market system. This is not what the Women's March stands for. Those things to me seem to be very logical things. What the Women's March stands for truly does include things like the reproductive justice, affordable abortion, birth control for all people, medically accurate sexuality education. They talk a lot, they're way down the path of the transgenderism and the identifying people however they want to be identified. Everyone on the planet say they should be free from gender norms, expectations, stereotypes. They have the whole living wage thing. I mean, it's just a radical leftist agenda. It has nothing to do with standing up for women. And that, my friends, is today's First Five. Okay, I won't except to say the numbers are way down, way down in terms of people showing up for the Women's March. So it's not really, it's not grabbing the country the way the leftists had wanted. And I'll tell you one thing we talked about during the rally yesterday, and there's one other fun thing to tell you, but during the rally we were talking about how a lot of people got frightened by the way the left depicted President Trump or candidate Trump during the campaign. 3 years later, employment numbers are fabulous. Border security is increasing. The economy is booming. People have more money to spend and they have jobs and they have opportunity. They have a sense of self-worth because they're supporting themselves. I think a lot of people who thought that America would just fall off the cliff as the media tried to predict if President Trump won, I've actually realized, wow, things are pretty darn good in this country. One last thing. I'll tell you, most of the marchers yesterday on the Women's March side looked angry, a lot of very ugly and some fairly crass things written on their signs, fairly gross, and just a lot of anger and ugliness. And on our side, there was one woman who was talking about, I actually feel sorry for them. I think we should be praying for these people because they're so unhappy. They're so angry. They're not living their life in happiness. I will tell you, on our side, it was upbeat, cheerful. Two last things about it, because it was fun yesterday. Two last things to tell you. One was that some guy I don't know walked up to me. I did have the megaphone, so I was leading the crowd and doing our little pro-America chants, USA. And he walked up and he said, "Excuse me, I think you need a MAGA hat." And I've never had a MAGA hat, actually. He had one. It's not actually MAGA. It is 2020, Keep America Great. So he just gave me this hat. He said, "Yeah, I got a lot of them. Here, you can have this one." And the other thing that happened is very interesting. There was a black couple who was walking by. This is a very public area near the public library in downtown Dallas. A black couple went by who was not there because of any of the email we did ahead of time to organize this. They just happened to walk by, and we had extra signs. A lot of extra signs. People had made tons of signs. So they stopped. They said, "Hey, do you mind if we join your protest?" We said, "No, we love it." So these people were salt of the earth, rock solid, love President Trump, love America, think the Women's March people are nuts. So they were using our signs, waving and yelling, totally joined in randomly from just having, because they were out on Sunday afternoon for a stroll. So it was a lot of fun. To be really clear, if you're listening to the show for the first time, I don't do marches very much. I think it's my third one in my whole life. But it was kind of fun to feel like you're getting out there and you're standing up a little bit against the messaging of the Women's March, which is, again, to try to tell America that America's women support their radical leftist agenda. If I could, I'd force them to rename their march. It's not the Women's March, it's the Radical Leftist March. You like their leftist views? Fine, this is America. But they don't speak for American women. And now that is really my first five. Okay, I want to turn and talk about this. Interesting, today is Martin Luther King Day. And of course, there are marches. This is kind of a First Amendment celebration show, but a lot of marches all around the country. Martin Luther King Day, honoring Martin Luther King's legacy. Of course, God bless that man for all he did for America and helping America through a horrible time where we're dealing with the following on the Ku Klux Klan, the Jim Crow laws, the segregation laws, all of the kind of evil, insidious segregation and racism in our country, and this guy, Martin Luther King, was just not going to stand for it. So he really was a tremendous leader in America, obviously. Born in January of 1929 and most tragically killed on April 4th of 1968. So today is the day that we honor Martin Luther King. And obviously, most people remember Martin Luther King's words, his most famous of all his speeches, and he had many famous speeches and many famous things he wrote. But his I Have a Dream speech, where he said, essentially, that he had a dream that one day his children would be judged by the content of their character, not the color of their skin. Many people point to that to say Martin Luther King maybe would not have agreed with affirmative action. He maybe would not have agreed with the way in America today there's so much of a push to divide us racially, to become more tribalistic, to become more critical of people based on their skin color and their ethnicity. And so we don't know how Martin Luther King would have addressed every single issue facing America today, but he made a fabulous contribution to America in his work in bringing justice and the end of segregation. Let me say, though, there's another great American patriot, a black American in American history, Frederick Douglass. We've had at least one person or maybe two people on the show over the years who work with various Frederick Douglass organizations. I just want to make a plug here on Martin Luther King Day for the idea that on a day we honor Martin Luther King, because we don't have a national holiday for Frederick Douglass, we should consider on Martin Luther King Day also honoring Frederick Douglass. And there's a reason I say this. There are probably many Americans. I mean, Harriet Tubman Day could be a day. There are many Americans, African Americans, who have helped bring justice and make us a more perfect union in our country. But Frederick Douglass is notable for his teaching. And he's obviously much earlier in time. He's not the Martin Luther King era, much earlier in time, back to the days of the ending of slavery. And he wrote a lot about what newly freed slaves should expect from America. This is Frederick Douglass, what should the newly freed slaves, now people with a right to live in freedom, what should they expect? And Frederick Douglass was just a most amazing, insightful, deep thinker. And he talked about in ways I want to just share briefly some things he had to say. He said, I am not asking for sympathy at the hands of abolitionists or sympathy at the hands of any. I think the American people are disposed often to be generous rather than just. I'm going to substitute modern parlance for his reference to African Americans, but again, what he just said, I don't want sympathy from the abolitionists or from anyone. I think the American people are disposed often to be generous rather than just. The regard to the black people, there's always more that is benevolent, I perceive, than just manifested toward us. What I ask for black Americans is not benevolence, not pity, not sympathy, but simply justice. He also went on to say, everybody asks a question, and they learn to ask it early, the abolitionists. What should we do with the black Americans? I've had but one answer from the beginning. Do nothing with us. Your doing with us has already played the mischief with us. Do nothing with us. And if the black American cannot stand on his own legs, let him fall also. All I ask is, give him a chance to stand on his own legs. Let him alone. I urge you to read more and more of the writings of Frederick Douglass. He's an amazing, amazing American in American history, an amazing guy who just, much of what he said, I think, does not sit well with the modern day advocacy from some elements of the American left that argue for, certainly Frederick Douglass would have rolled his eyes in disgust at the idea of reparations. He's just saying, we want to be treated with justice. We want to be treated fairly. We're not asking for pity, benevolence, handouts, just justice. Anyway, I love, as we in America continue the American political conversation about making a more perfect union, of bringing people together in this country, of finding more of a basis of unity, I love if we'd honor both Martin Luther King and Frederick Douglass. Okay, folks, I have two other topics I just got to hit today in this day of talking about rallies. I don't know why I'm so pumped up. First, I want to mention, I am so glad to be back in Dallas. We had a great time in California. We saw family, visited family, saw the ocean, got our toes in the ocean, all that kind of stuff. But and I did the show from California. And some of you, in fact, more than a few of you, had a few remarks to make about the appearance of the studio in California. Okay, it's not a studio. I'm literally visiting family out there using an empty room. So I am thrilled to be back in this very professional, lovely, high-end, wonderful studio. Very happy to be back with Matt Stoker, the producer extraordinaire, who makes me look good even when I'm just kind of running late. So I'm just grateful to be back in the studio and to have this opportunity every day to talk with you about the extraordinary importance of America. So next topic I want to hit, this has to do with in the state of Virginia. Now, we talked about in Virginia before that they went all Dem, the Democrat control of the state of Virginia. Governor's mansion, House, or they have two different names. They don't call it House and Senate delegates and whatever it is. The point is, they're all Democrat controlled. And the Democrats have lost no time, wasted no time in jumping in for a radical gun control agenda. And so this is kind of a wake-up call to people around the country wondering what would happen if we this fall in 2020 were to choose one of the gun-grabbing Democrats who may become president of the United States. What would happen? Well, in Virginia, they first of all, today, this particular day today, happens to be a holiday in Virginia every year called Lobby Day. What's happening in Virginia today with this gun rally is consistent with or part of what they have regularly called Lobby Day. It's basically everyone goes to the Capitol, if you want to. You go to the Capitol to lobby on what it is you care about. Whatever your issue is, I'm sure there are hundreds of them. But because the Virginia legislature is moving rapidly towards gun control, gun confiscation, scaring the daylights out of rational, reasonable, responsible gun owners in Virginia, causing them to realize, my gosh, this Democrat government really means to take our guns away. So there's a gun rally in Virginia today. And I want to tell you about it in a moment. It's ongoing today, and this is it's a really tough thing in Virginia because I think heartland Virginia, the heartland, the middle of it, the old Virginia, and the farms and ranches, people have been there forever. These people are just at their core basic American citizens. They're conservative basic American citizens. They cannot believe what's happening to their state. You have the northern part of the state with more and more people moving out of Washington, living in the Virginia suburbs right outside of Washington, D.C., bringing their leftism to their state. And you have more and more leniency with respect to the growth in the citizen population in Virginia that are new citizens, people coming to America, have gotten citizenship, and many, and I've forgotten the number now, I don't have it in front of me, something like 30% of the Virginia voters have been here 5 years or less. That's probably not accurate, don't quote that, but it's a significant number. And the point of it is that people moving into Virginia have no sense of the history of the importance of the Second Amendment, what it means, what it stands for. And so they have voted themselves a very left-wing government. So first I want to start, Matt, the very wonderful. I sent you a tweet that was by an NBC News reporter about this Second Amendment rally. And so the Second Amendment rally is happening. And of course, the leftists are going to show up to protest against the Second Amendment, people who are in Richmond to support the Second Amendment. So we have a tweet from a reporter, NBC reporter, Ben Collins. And I don't know, Matt, if you have that tweet, but here he is. I can tell you what this guy had to say. This is a tweet by an NBC reporter. Reporters covering tomorrow's white nationalist rally in Virginia, I'm absolutely begging you, verify information before you send it out tomorrow. Even if it's a very sensational rumor you heard from a cop. Don't become a hero in neo-Nazi propaganda circles with made-up stuff. Please understand what this guy is saying. This is an NBC reporter equating people showing up to support their Second Amendment rights, to speak up about the Virginia legislature as they are poised to begin gun confiscation, fully backed by their governor. And these people are saying, wait a minute, this is America. We have a Second Amendment right. And because the media and the left, the whole cabal of the left, the Democrat Party, the media, the leftists, all of them deplore the Second Amendment, they deplore that spirit of freedom in America, which is what the Second Amendment is about. And I'll say, put a comma here, the Second Amendment is there in the Constitution to protect the right of the people against an overly aggressive, abusive government. The Second Amendment exists to keep the balance of power between the people and the government. Second Amendment is also handy for people who like to go hunting, people who want to use a gun to protect their homes or protect themselves in public, or take out a shooter who's trying to kill people in a church or a store. Lots of good reasons for a Second Amendment, but the core reason for the Second Amendment is to protect the people, to give the people a means of protection against an overly aggressive government. And this is exactly what's happening in Virginia. So Mr. NBC guy tweets out that equating Second Amendment protesters, Second Amendment advocates, with, as in his terms, white nationalist rally, calling them neo-Nazis. So a great thing happened at that rally, which was there was a black gentleman, a citizen of Virginia, a supporter of the Second Amendment, and he showed up at the rally and participated and gave a little interview, a little clip about why he's there speaking up for the Second Amendment. I want to have Matt the Wonderful play this guy from Virginia at the gun rally.
Okay, why am I out here? Basically, I'm out here because I got roped into it by the group of guys you see standing to my right. But the real reason I'm out here is I do not support in any way, shape, or form Governor Northam's and the Democrats' gun control. What I also don't support is the fact that every news piece you've seen on this weekend, they've always brought up the issue of race, as though it's nothing but white rednecks and hillbillies out here who care for the Second Amendment, when actually Black Americans, Asian Americans, Hispanic Americans, Americans in general care about the Second Amendment. I work at a gun store part-time, and I can't tell you the number of customers I see of all races, all colors, all creeds, who care about the Second Amendment and who just want to peaceably live their lives, enjoy their rights, and the Second Amendment. So that's why I'm out here. And big media, mainstream media be damned. If you take a good look at me, you can see I'm a black American, and all I'm out here for is to enjoy my Second Amendment rights. That's why I'm here.
Okay, I love that guy. I actually tried to find his name. I never found his name. He's someone who's at this rally in Virginia. But I want to close the discussion of this particular issue in Virginia by letting you know a really pretty serious thing. Now, we're going to find out by the end of today what, if anything, happened in terms of violence. I hope no violence happened. That would be terrible if any violence happened. But I want to tell you, there was a Republican member of the Virginia State Senate, a woman Republican member of the Virginia State Senate. Her name is Amanda Chase. Amanda Chase, who supports these Second Amendment supporters, who's in favor of the rally to protect the Second Amendment. She put out a warning on Facebook on Friday. She said to the thousands of Second Amendment advocates who are planning to attend the upcoming massive pro-gun rally in Richmond, she's saying they are being set up. This group that organizes the Virginia Citizens Defense League organized the event on this lobby day in Virginia. She actually said, and these are the words of a Virginia state senator, tens of thousands are expected to show up for the event Monday in Richmond. Given the contentious nature of the issue, the prospect of such a large event has raised tensions. Earlier, Virginia Democrat Governor Ralph Northam declared a state of emergency before the rally even started. Declared a state of emergency, and recent arrests have further raised those tensions. She says, sadly, I am posting knowing that the governor of Virginia has declared a state of emergency in our state. And then she goes on to point out, if you people show up wearing any kind of uniform, patch, or other symbol on your clothing signifying that you belong to a militia, and then something goes wrong, you could or will be held as a domestic terrorist. The governor, using the media, has already set the stage for this to happen. He has already laid the groundwork to make the entire movement look like insurrection. It will be used to put the rest of the nation on notice of what will happen to you if you resist. They have used the Southern Poverty Law Center over the last 15 years to lay the groundwork. They've labeled us as potential domestic terrorists for a long time now. She goes on and on. This article is also on my website, americacanwetalk.org. On the homepage, under shows, drop down list of links. You should read her entire statement. I'm making the point to you that people, even though they're responsible, this is not just a random person on the street. This is a woman who managed to get elected to the Virginia State Senate. She's warning the people of Virginia, the governor, Northam, the left, the media, the Southern Poverty Law Center. They are trying to set up gun supporters, Second Amendment ralliers, to be arrested and accused as potential terrorists. She's saying Northam is deliberately doing this, trying to characterize people who would dare stand up for their Second Amendment rights as somehow dangerous terrorists. And I'm telling you, folks, this is a great thing to watch wherever you live. Watch what happens in Virginia and spread this segment of this show around to your friends. Understand where the left is headed when they say they use really polite expressions like, we just want reasonable gun control, just a little bit of caution, just a kind of, common sense gun control. There's, in the left-wing mind, there is no such thing as a limitation, a common sense limitation on gun control. And again, the Second Amendment is in the Constitution, not so you can perfect skeet shooting, not for hunting season, not even for protection of yourself and your home against thieves and murderers. It is in the Second Amendment to keep the balance of power between the government and the people. And this is what the government of the state of Virginia does not want. He and the Democrats controlling that legislature are about gun confiscation. You got to understand where the left is coming from. My last story today, and this is on the impeachment. Now, obviously, Nancy Pelosi finally gave it up and brought the articles of impeachment from the House over to the U.S. Senate. There are a bunch of different things I want to tell you about this story. So that the deal is tomorrow, Tuesday, the Senate is going to begin the impeachment proceeding. There are some things top-level issues I want to point out, and then I want to turn to some of the specifics. But I want to make this top-level summary and urge you to keep this in mind with every news story you read about the impeachment, everything you read about the impeachment. You will have the media dragging you down into the details of, well, but this witness said this, and that seemed to slightly conflict with something someone said that Trump said, and this person said this, and maybe you could argue that, and you'll hear the media will flood America with arguments that somehow what is being said on the floor of the Senate is game-changing. It is over. It is massively problematic. It is the end of President Trump. Before you get sucked in to all of those stories, please remember these things. The Democrats are trying to impeach President Trump, accusing him of something that top presidential contender Democrat Joe Biden not only admitted to doing on an open mic to a crowd of thousands, bragged about doing. The Democrats' top contender, Joe Biden, said he threatened the Ukrainians, we're going to withhold $1 billion in aid until you fire this prosecutor who's investigating my son's company. Now, in the speech, he didn't say my son's company, but that was the point. He not only threatened them, he brought about the result of his threat. The Ukrainians fired the prosecutor looking into the corruption of Burisma, the company on which Joe Biden's son sat on the board, and made millions for doing nothing. So you have the Democrat Party, every member of the U.S. House and the U.S. Senate and the Democrat side and the Republican side is perfectly aware of what I just told you, perfectly aware. They know this is what Biden did. He told us, he bragged, he got the guy fired. So the Democrats are more upset because President Trump said to the Ukraine, you need to look into this. You need to finish this investigation that got hampered. You got to find out, get to the bottom of the corruption. They're more bothered by President Trump seeking the truth on the Biden-Burisma Ukrainian corruption than they are by the actual fact of the known, indisputable corruption. This is the most absurd. The word Orwellian doesn't even rise to the occasion. It's not even good enough. The word Orwellian is so overused that you don't even fathom or connect with the crazy that this is. The Democrats are staring you in the camera, staring you in the face. All these Democrat leaders, very pompously saying that there will be no calling of Joe Biden to the witness stand, no calling whatsoever, no calling of any Biden. No one has to. Hunter Biden's not going to come and testify. That's irrelevant. That's been solved. That's years ago. We've moved on from that. Everyone's moved on from that. Stop talking about that. So you can't talk about the corruption, but they can think they can remove the duly elected president for asking the Ukrainians, do you think you want to find out what happened? And do not get caught up in all the, well, what day exactly was aid withheld and who knew what aid it was and who in the Ukraine was aware of it and how long was it? I mean, there is going to be endless discussion down here in the weeds, down here in the trees. Keep your head above that. This is the Democrats saying Biden's eligible and should be president, though he is corrupt, and we know his corruption. But when President Trump wants them to look into it, that makes him not eligible. That's point number one. Point number two, understand that the Democrats have been after President Trump since the moment he won the presidential election in 2016. They have raised issue after issue after issue, trying to claim somehow President Trump was illegitimate in his victory, or else he is not. He cannot possibly serve. He's not entitled to serve. He's not eligible to serve. He's got some problem that somehow diminishes him. We have the millions and millions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of hours of testimony and depositions, all to get around to the clarity that even after all that digging, the Mueller report came out. No Trump-Russia collusion. No, there was just nothing wrong between this alleged collusion between Trump and the Russians. We got done with that, and then they're on to this. Understand, this is just the next bullet in the same gun. This is just the next verse of the same song. The Democrats want to remove Trump. They just think maybe they found something now. They want to remove him because they're angry beyond belief that he dared to win, and he's an outsider, and he's not allowed to be president because Hillary gets to be president. And the third thing to keep in mind is the reason so many Democrats, and sadly, an unknown number of Republicans in Washington are letting this impeachment go forward is because they're out of their minds with the Trump agenda to drain their swamp. Out of their minds. They cannot believe President Trump is actually draining the swamp just like he said he would. Keep those top points in mind, those 3 points. And now I'll turn to play a few little clips. We have some lawyers. Thank goodness President Trump gets to have lawyers this time. So President Trump has one, which is Alan Dershowitz. Fabulous. Well, the great thing about Dershowitz is he is a Democrat. He's been a lib for years. He's finally realizing how corrupt the Democrat Party is to the core. So we have a clip from Alan Dershowitz being interviewed talking about President Trump and his defense in the upcoming Senate impeachment trial.
Though, is it your position that President Trump should not be impeached, even if all the evidence and arguments laid out by the House are accepted as fact?
That's right. When you have somebody who, for example, is indicted for a crime, let's assume you have a lot of evidence, but the grand jury simply indicts for something that's not a crime, and that's what happened here. You have a lot of evidence, disputed evidence, could go both ways, but the vote was to impeach on abuse of power, which is not within the constitutional criteria for impeachment, and obstruction of Congress. Those are both the kinds of things that led Hamilton and Madison, talk about nightmare, to regard that as the greatest nightmare. Number one, giving Congress too much power to allow the president to serve at the will of Congress. And number two, as Hamilton put it, the greatest danger is turning impeachment into a question of who has the most votes in which house, and rather than having a consensus and a broad view of impeachable conduct.
The brief.
Okay. He's exactly right. Alan Dershowitz, I mean, I have to hand it to you. I used to not like him very much because he always came down on the left, although he always used to have, even when he was more of an outspoken leftist, a sense of legal and rational integrity to him that you don't find very often, frankly, in leftists. But this is a guy who can finally see how corrupt the Democrat Party is. He's having none of it. Other clip I wanted to play, the Trump legal team that is going to take this issue and defend President Trump in the Senate impeachment trial includes Alan Dershowitz, thank goodness. Also includes a guy named Robert Ray. I have a quick clip by him. I believe Matt the Wonderful has ready also from Robert Ray.
Well, it's a big deal because ultimately, in the eyes of history, we are all going to be judged about whether or not we acted in the best interest of the country. I think the president's principal defense, and you saw it in the answer that was interposed over the weekend, is very simple. This is an entirely partisan and therefore illegitimate effort by House Democrats to remove a president from office. And the remedy for that is the United States Senate, as envisioned by the framers of the Constitution, in order to overturn the will of the electorate in the 2016 election, and particularly given the fact that we are now in the middle of a presidential campaign for 2020. Ultimately, that will can only be overturned with a bipartisan effort and overwhelming bipartisan support in the Senate with a two-thirds majority in order to remove a president and overturn the will of that electorate. Very simple.
Okay, I got to tell you, I'm out of time here, but I'll tell you two other quick things that are really good and important to understand. One is, at least as of now, the Senate obviously now has moved over to the Senate, so the Senate Republican majority, so Senator Mitch McConnell is in charge. Well, let's hope he can hang in there, but he has apparently included in the U.S. Senate impeachment trial rules a provision called the kill switch, which is a provision in the rules, because with any trial you have to set rules for the trial, and it's always unique. Obviously, it's fortunately rare that we have impeachment trials in the Senate, but the ruling party makes rules, and they can listen to the minority party or not. But the Senate trial rules for this impeachment include a kill switch. Effectively allows the president's legal team to seek an immediate verdict or dismissal of the case. Let me read that again. The president's legal team can seek an immediate verdict or dismissal of the case should the Democrats engage, and so the reason for it is should the Democrats engage in any shenanigans like they did in the House. And this is part of what I think is so challenging and interesting and just honestly astonishing about this Senate trial. You know, we talked about this in the show last week. The basic thing's going to happen. The House appoints its managers. They schlep over to the Senate. They sit down with the senators. They say, here's what our impeachment's all about. And then, so they lay out their case, and then the president's legal team lays out his case. They have not committed any further in the Senate beyond the House managers giving their version, the Senate, the defense of the president through his lawyers in the Senate, and then you get to that's as far as they've committed. Beyond that, the question of witnesses, what is so amazing, and I talked earlier about the brazenness of this effort to remove the president. There are Democrat senators urging that all sorts of people who didn't testify in the House, but they might have been good witnesses, and we'd love to get them if we can, so we're going to try to get these witnesses. They want to argue that all the witnesses they can think up and come up with, the Democrats in the Senate are saying this, should get to testify. They want to have witnesses, but no way can Hunter Biden, the core, and Joe Biden, the nub of the issue, no way can those two people be called as witnesses. So at least we have, as I mentioned, I think one day last week, Rand Paul, Republican Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, has said, folks, if you're going to have witnesses, I'm going to force a vote on Hunter Biden. I'm going to force you to vote. And this is what the Democrats really want. They want to force a list of witnesses into the Senate, and so they want to have every senator have to vote yes or no on particular witnesses because they think it's going to hurt Republicans who have to go back and explain to their constituents why I voted no on witness so-and-so and so-and-so. They think it'll hurt the Republicans. I don't think so, and I think this kill switch thing should be in there. I'd love to put the Republicans in the Senate on the stand, just put them on notice. You're going to be called on to make a vote on this. And then you're going to end up with, because I do think they're Republicans, everyone knows their names, the weak-kneed Republicans who never stand for anything. Romney was leading the crowd on that at this point, Senator Romney of Utah, but you have Murkowski of Alaska, you have Susan Collins of Maine, just endlessly unreliable. The point I'm making is, I think that when they finally get to the end of the House case and the Senate case, the president's lawyers will probably call for a vote, just call for dismissal, and then it's going to be incumbent on the Republican senators who have the majority and the Democrat senators to get out there and say their name and the way this and cast their vote and let America know where they stand. And the Senate is required to come up with 2/3 majority to remove the president. So it's unlikely that he will be removed, extremely unlikely he'll be removed. But I think it will be incumbent on the Republicans. And I got to tell you, one of the closing thought before I turn to why all this matters to you. First of all, on my website, there is a great article. Charles Schumer, Chucky Schumer, wrote a letter to the president. At the time, Bill Clinton was being impeached and facing trial in the Senate. And to hear him pour out how unfair this is and how wrong this is, and nobody's perfect, and you know, the American people, they seem to love President Clinton. And I mean, this whole, everything he says should be directly applied to how he's treating President Trump, but he doesn't. Clinton, he was finding ways to excuse everything. Trump, he's saying he's going for the jugular. But I will close out this segment on the impeachment as we launch off, I guess, tomorrow on the impeachment with this point. If you are a member of the Republican Party and you've risen to the level to serve as one of 100 senators in this country, and you cannot see what the Democrats are doing to this country, if you cannot see that this impeachment is just the latest version of their attack on President Trump, if you cannot discern that this impeachment has nothing to do with the Ukrainians and the president's conversation and the Burisma, it has everything to do with the Democrats' determination to take down the duly elected president. If you can't perceive that, you really don't have the smarts to be in the Senate. It's deeply troubling to me that anyone serving in that role in the Senate cannot see what the Democrats are doing. If you cannot see that this president was elected to drain the swamp, and he's doing that, and he is doing things that the American people have wanted for decades. He is draining the swamp, reducing regulations, securing our military, securing the border, strengthening America, renewing the sovereignty of America. This is what the American people have wanted for decades. And the Republican senators currently serving today in the Senate need to get that, understand that, and vote to acquit. And now, my friends, I'm going to turn and talk to you. I could go on, but apparently I'm out of time. So I do want to go on, and I would love to talk about it more, but I can't right now. I'm going to turn and tell you why the stories we talked about today matter to you. Number one, our first story we talked about today, the Women's March. The official Women's March topics for this year are these issues: abortion rights, immigration reform, LGBTQ acceptance, and gun control. This is a leftist march. The Women's March is a leftist march. It's not a women's march, because millions of American women are pro-life, pro-border security, pro-traditional marriage and family, pro-Second Amendment. The attendance at the 2020 Women's March is down dramatically from 2016. Women are seeing through leftist propaganda. On the Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King Day, MLK, forever known and revered for I Have a Dream, judging by the content of character, not the color of skin, is quintessentially Christian and American and conservative. Merit matters. Skin color is irrelevant to merit. Frederick Douglass is underappreciated in U.S. history. He aggressively denounced sympathy and victimhood for Black Americans. He stood for individual dignity and honor, consistent with the American founding. The right comprehension of both of these Black American patriots and what they stood and spoke up for, literally, would do much to diminish racial tension. Both are deserving of honor in America. On the Virginia gun rally and the trap being set by the Dems, the left attempts to falsely equate gun ownership with white supremacist ideology. Overreaching Dem legislature and the governor of Virginia have stoked Virginians' grassroots anger over unwarranted gun control. A state senator fears protesters supporting the Second Amendment in Virginia Capitol today are being set up to be falsely accused of terrorism or racial violence. A Black spokesman for gun rights went viral with his complete dismissal of the idea that racism has anything to do with the purpose of the rally today. Support for the Second Amendment is about freedom and keeping the balance of power between the people and the government. It has nothing to do with skin color. And finally, the impeachment trial. Stay focused on the big picture. Do not get drawn into the weeds of the daily mainstream media headlines. The articles of impeachment are baseless. There is no crime. The Dems have sought to undo the 2016 election since the day President Trump won. There is nothing culpable about President Trump's behavior because investigating the manifest corruption of the Bidens is in America's interest and impelled, in fact, by Joe Biden's video boasting, not by anyone digging up dirt against a political opponent. Complete acquittal is the only just outcome. The House abused its constitutional impeachment power, and the Senate needs to tell them that. And that, my friends, is America Can We Talk for today. So great being back in studio. So great getting this chance to talk once again about the unique, extraordinary importance of this precious country. Tune in every day, Monday through Thursday, 3 p.m. Central Time, to America Can We Talk, where I always talk truth about America, because America matters. I'll talk to you next time.
America Can We Talk? Truth about America.
Can you hear